All right, we finish up today's panel before we open it up to questions by having Emily Martik from California University of Pennsylvania present her paper entitled, I Owe My Soul to the Company Store.
Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge and thank Dr. Martik and Dr. Ani, who isn't in this room right now, for their help with helping me develop this paper. In his fatalistic song about the hardships of the early coal miners, entitled 16 Tons, Tennessee Ernie Ford sang the famous chorus, "You load 16 tons, what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, 'cause I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store." This song, which became an unexpected hit in the 1950s, summarizes the knowledge of most Americans in regard to the mining industry. History and popular culture tend to be biased in their accounts of this industry by sympathizing with the miner and demonizing the company. This one-sided perspective is not representative of the real relationship between the two and is guilty, in some cases, of exaggeration. The company store is one such case. Public knowledge of the store generally includes the negative terms scrip payments, debt peonage, monopoly, etc. Not included in this list are the positive functions of the company store in the mining community, such as its support of families during the Great Depression through store services and its role as the central cultural gathering place for residents of the patch. With such information available, it is only correct to say that the poor reputation of the company store has been exaggerated. The inclusion of the company store in mining communities began out of necessity. Few independent store owners wanted to risk their livelihoods on an unstable settlement, where survival depended solely on the demand for coal. A wise decision considering the industry crippling slump in demand that persisted throughout the 1920s. Rather than recovering from the fall, though, business in the coal sector of the economy buckled under the weight of the ensuing depression. In one corner of the bituminous coal-rich region of Appalachia, workers of the Vesta No. 4 mine, which was located in California and Pennsylvania, were paid around $2.40 for a day of hard labor during the 1930s. This pittance was not enough to support the families of the vastly immigrant workers. Much of the blame for this poverty is historically placed on the company store, which is accused of oppressing the miners through the use of scrip, debt, and a forced monopoly. Scrip is paper money that was issued by the company on payday instead of cash. It was redeemable for goods only at the company's store. By paying its miners in scrip, the company could be sure of sales at the store and therefore profit. This method, along with the mining community's geographic and social isolation from the outside world, allowed the store to obtain a monopoly on goods and services within the community. It would then be free to charge whatever outlandish prices it chose. The final leg of the trio of offenses amassed against the company store is its supposed utilization of a debt peonage system to hypothetically imprison its workers. By deducting store purchases and the cost of work equipment from a miner's paycheck, the company effectively managed to tie workers to the mine for the duration of their debt. "We always owed the company store money," said the daughter of a Ritchie-ville miner in a book by local author Arthur Vincent Ciervo entitled Always in a Hole. "My dad once went 3 years without getting a penny in his paycheck." This is the same phenomenon that is mentioned, that is the focus of Ford's bluesy song, the ability of the company store to drain a man dry and ransom his soul. Both are also a little too dramatic to be representative of every transaction between the miner and the store. In truth, the oppressiveness of the company store is an exaggeration. In his essay for the Journal of Economic History, entitled "Did Coal Miners Owe Their Souls to the Company Store? Theory and Evidence from the Early 1990s," Price v. Fishback makes the point that store monopoly, issuance of scrip, and the accumulation of debt were not as troublesome as they are popularly deemed. Quote, "Miners were paid in cash monthly or every 2 weeks. Scrip was an advance on wages due the following payday, which was negotiable at its full price at the company's store," he wrote, making the issuance of scrip seem more like a convenience than a means of oppression. He certainly does not imply that the main reason companies used scrip was to create and extort a monopoly on its customers. The true reason for higher than average prices at the stores, he explains, is not deliberate greed, but the higher cost of transportation required for the isolated towns. His rationalization behind that idea? Isolated mines faced higher transport costs for store goods and would therefore be expected to charge higher store prices that were offset by higher wages. As for the debt peonage conundrum, Fishback does not believe in the widespread occurrence of debt to the company's store, for the simple reason that extending scrip beyond the amount due to the employees by payday was rare. Evidence from government reports researched by Fishback seems to indicate the opposite of the public's expectations, that relatively few miners were in debt. This does not mean that the stories of those miners who struggled with their financial security are false, just that there is another side to them. Not much credit is given to the company store for its role in positively affecting the mining community during the Great Depression, the time when aid and relief were most needed, but unfortunately least likely to be accepted. Miners, just like other workers across the country, were reluctant to take charity from the government as a means of protecting their pride, which was sometimes the only thing left to them. But even if they were able to defeat their stubbornness and consent to help, there was not much money to go around. Local governments, the primary givers of relief in America, suffered the most from the Great Depression and were barely able to dole out enough aid to the many sufferers. In the book People, Poverty, and Politics, Pennsylvanians During the Great Depression by Thomas Coode and John Bauman, it is written that, quote, between 1929 and 1932, severe unemployment overwhelmed the resources of the local poor boards and voluntary welfare agencies. Both the state and the federal government had to assume increasing responsibility for unemployment relief, unquote. Unfortunately, even that help was strained. Sierra writes in his book about the story of one Ritchieville family that was removed from the list of families set to receive aid because a small patch of lettuce was discovered in their yard by a state inspector. Why are you getting relief?" the inspector asked. "You have something to eat." With about 37% of Pennsylvania's working population unemployed in 1933, the state and federal governments were definitely and understandably spread too thin to be effective. The only other option for the miners then was the company store. During the Great Depression, stores were willing to allow miners to borrow food and other necessities on credit, a deed not many others were willing to copy. Granted, the stores did have important financial records of the miners open to their use, such as information on salaries and credit reports, but the generosity of the action cannot be ignored. In an article of the Brownsville Telegraph, a reporter writes, "Had it not been for the company store's efforts, countless families would have faced dire privation. They poured out credit beyond reason to homes without income or hope of income. They handed out foodstuffs and other merchandise without question, tens of thousands of dollars worth. When every other avenue of aid for jobless men and women was closed, they came to the rescue." This description of the company store is not at all compatible with the oppressive business of popular culture's creation, but it is closer to the truth. After all, the most basic unit of the company store, or any store for that matter, was people. People stocked the shelves, manned the register, and conducted the daily business of the store. They provided the frequent customers with goods and gossip, thereby establishing a friendly repertoire of loyal customers within the community. Housewives were especially attracted to the store, as a means of escaping the bustle of home life to socialize with friends and fellow wives. Transforming the company store into a social gathering space gives a heart to a supposedly heartless industry. It creates the impression that miners and their families had mixed feelings about the store, as both a symbol of repressive employers and one of relaxed socializing. History may remember only the dramatic injustices perpetrated there, but the miners, with first-hand experience, remember both the bad and the good times. In conclusion, public opinion of the company store is colored with bias and exaggeration. The occurrences of scrip payments, debt peonage, and store monopolies were much less severe than they were thought to have been, and relief services and important social functions actually benefited the miners and their families during such troubled times as the Great Depression. As for Tennessee Ernie Ford and his career-making song, its artistic fatalism is appreciated but not accurate.